Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the final episode in the Big Lawyering series. I'm here with Adam Yohanan and Kyle Harbaugh, and we are going to be talking about essentially how you thrive in the big law space, whether you're trying to move up the ranks or start your own thing or, try something new. And so we're just going to get started. Although we've done this every episode, I want you guys to introduce yourselves again,
Sure.
just in case people aren't catching these in order. And then we'll get started.
Hi, everyone. Kyle Harbaugh with Chief Go Officers. So I've worked in law firms for a long time, almost 15 years. Big firms, small firms, and I've seen a lot of different situations. And now I help law firms scale, grow, operate more effectively, efficiently, hire the right people. And so that's how I fit into the mix. And then Adam, I'll let you take it away.
I'm Adam Yohanan, former associate at Milbank and Wilkie. And after that, I left to start my own law firm focusing on small business corporate transactions.
All right. Well, Kyle, just hit us with those questions. I
Sure,
know people are
sure.
itching to hear.
So I wanted to ask you, both of you, you talked at length last time about doing something, working at Big Law and having something more than money. That money is not a bad motivator, but you should have some deeper whys. I wanted to ask you how that worked out for you, or why you found that to be important, to have something a bigger why. How did that impact your goals?
Adam, I'm going to let you start.
So the problem with big law is that it doesn't really solve the why question in pretty much every single practice area. You might not be doing bad, but you're not really doing good either in almost all situations. So that usually comes down to who the clients are. Many of us, we become lawyers with certain types of clients in mind or certain social missions. And we don't lose that when we go into big law. We keep thinking about the things that matter to us. So to me, I care about business, but I obviously have a much softer spot for the smaller businesses and for the entrepreneurs than I do for large public companies or large private equity backed companies. So it comes down to who you serve. And I wanted to serve people that I was more passionate about. The everyday entrepreneur in New York City needs help, and I was drawn to them. So I'm much happier now waking up every day serving the small business community. And that's such a buzzword. Oh, I'm going to help small businesses. Everyone wants to say they're going to help small businesses, but to actually do that every single day is not something that many people do. It's only a certain class of lawyers, only a certain class of accountants, and that's a beautiful thing. And there are infinite other categories that inspire people, and a lot of us choose to reconnect with those categories of people as we leave big law. So some people become prosecutors, some people become public defenders, some people work in nonprofits, and maybe there's a perception that some of those avenues don't want ex big law people because they might not have the right mission. I don't think that that's true. I think most nonprofit and government employers are quite thrilled to have a big law associate. Obviously, they still want to see that you care in addition, but I don't think it's hard to demonstrate that. It certainly wasn't hard for me to demonstrate to my small business clients that I actually cared more about them. The narrative that I'm just in big law to learn or to get money before I do what I really want to do is totally believable, and it's a decent pitch.
No, and just to piggyback off of that, like that narrative that like people start out in big law knowing that they're gonna leave like within 3 to 5 years is like totally normal behavior. And like I remember like even as a summer, there were people in my summer class that were already talking about what they were gonna be doing after their big law stint, which like was completely foreign to me because I thought, wait, what do you mean? Like, we did all this work to get here. So you just like, you like basically got yourself crushed in law school. You're gonna like essentially like sign a contract to to be crushed for as long as you want to be, you know, at will, if you will, contract. But ultimately like your goal is to leave. Like for me, like, you know, that was foreign. I actually went into it thinking, you know, I'm choosing a firm where I can see myself long term. And that's because like immigrant family, like you get a job, you work really hard, you move up the ranks. Like that's just how I was taught and brought up. And so like once I got into, you know, my first law firm, especially, like I thought I was gonna be there forever. Um, and let me tell you, like I've been like looking at my life just as a general point where I'm like, why do you even believe in forever anymore? Like like literally nothing is forever. And I think that's something I want to kind of add to the conversation here is like you kind of have to go into it like, yes, like long term it would be really great if this worked out and like it really fit your life, you know, for every season of your life, and you just work, you know, you found a perfect team and like things were going well and you felt really supported and everything, and you know, and somehow like you really enjoyed working with like the private equity backed, you know, client or the financial institutions or other large, you know, types of corporations or government agencies, because like big law firms tend to be the ones representing anything quote unquote big, right? So big, think big government, big, you know, big tech, big medicine and healthcare, like all of these like all of these like kind of broader industries, you know, when you look at like the top 100 companies, like it's big, the top 100 firms are representing like these top companies, right? And so maybe you find that, but also giving yourself room to change your mind, even if you think like, yes, like this is what I want to do. And so, and that was something I had to do, like kind of as I was going along, like, oh, like it's okay, like you don't have to lock yourself into being at one firm because you have like this false sense of loyalty to a team or to a group, which I'll admit was very easy for me because when I came back from my summer, like half the people that were in my practice group were gone. And that was another thing that was like, so like in the other industries, I'm like, I worked in academia before, and that was not a normal thing where like your entire team could like disappear, you know, while you're on like a holiday, you know? And so kind of recognizing like one, like, yes, like this could be your 3 to 5 year plan. It could also be a long-term plan, and but still always kind of give yourself room to change your mind. And I think that was something that helped me along the way, was realizing like, hey, like on the one hand, go where the money is, but also go where the learning, for me, it was go where the learning is, right? And so my first firm ended up being kind of limited in scope. Like all they did was let fin. So like after, I get bored with doing the same thing over and over again. Like, you know, I'll come right out and say it. And so after a while, I was kind of like, okay, this feels a lot like copy and paste to me. And so I didn't feel like I was practicing law. I didn't feel like I was being innovative or creative because I was just going from precedents. And so when I had an opportunity to lateral at a firm where they had just other silos of the banking and finance space, I jumped at the opportunity. And luckily I had mentors that didn't ostracize me for it. They were kind of like, no, go for it, you know, because again, being first gen everything, I didn't know that you don't go to your boss and say, hey, these people are trying to poach me. You know. um and so I went and asked for advice, and you know, I consider myself really blessed in that early part of my career because, you know, the people that I talked to, they were very supportive. Like, no, that's a really good opportunity for you. Like, if you're saying you're really interested in like becoming this smart lawyer and learning as much as possible, there's a really good opportunity for you and you should take it. And so I jumped from like a top 50 firm to like a top 15 firm, you know, relatively quickly. And so kind of thinking in those lines, I think is really important. Like, one, it's okay to have this 3 to 5 year plan. It's okay to have this long-term plan of, oh, I want to be a partner at a firm one day. But like understanding like when life happens, it's also okay to say, you know what, I need to take a break. I need to take a step back. You know, I need to reassess what I'm doing here. And I think each of these paths are really important. For, you know, ultimately it's choice. And I think that's something, at least in the big law space, that I found where there's a lot of judgment when people make their choices, right? Sometimes where it's like, people on the outside looking in, oh, that person couldn't handle it, that's why they left. Like, I feel like that's something that, and it's like, or maybe I decided this is not something that needs to be handled. You know, like like maybe I decided what I'm giving up, like the return on my investment is not worth what I'm actually putting in, right? And so that for me, I think again, it kind of goes back to what we said last episode. Like, the great thing about starting out in big law is the amount of choices you have available to you. And Adam, you know, succinctly kind of listed all the, like, there are like 10 options he gave of where you can go, right? You know, whether it's in public interest, you know, nonprofit, government, in-house, wherever, or starting your own firm. I'll admit though, Adam, I'm kind of jelly of you having your own firm. I'm like,
Well,
should I try that instead? You know, but that's like the FOMO life, right? Where you're like, oh, should I have done that instead? But you know, ultimately, I think it goes down to personal choice and being willing to kind of own your choice and be gracious with yourself as you're, you know, navigating your career.
yeah, what I heard you say there is it's okay to have a plan, but it's okay to hold it kind of loosely and or reprioritize things and shift things around if it stops making sense. And that's definitely been my experience. And so I wanted to ask you, Adam, since Aubria already brought it up, what how did you prepare from big law to launching your own firm? Like, what was the preparation like?
So for me, there was really no preparation. Things just happened very quickly, and one day I was just out of the job and I just did it. But the better way to do it is to plan well in advance. So I talk to people who are on the inside all the time, and the runway is often months, like 6 months, maybe more. And I see them launching really efficiently when they do it like that. So I think that's the best way to do it. And Aubria mentioned like being kind of blunt with your supervisor or mentor about your plans to leave. That works more than you'd expect. Obviously, tread carefully because in many situations it definitely won't work. But and oftentimes people leave, especially if they leave for another law firm.
Mm-hmm.
Partners can be quite brutal about it. And like I was at one firm, they wouldn't give you like the goodbye party, or like they would even be like mean about it. Like, so that can happen. So you have to be careful. At the same time though, many people just don't care because it's
Mm-hmm.
not personal. They would throw you out if they needed to. They know how big the turnover is. So I would consider telling people perhaps, but they're not gonna like fire you for it. If you're a partner, you'd be gone the next day just for thinking of it. But it's a bit looser with the associates. Most people understand. So if it's someone that you trust, I would run that by them. And the more different the path is from big law, the more accepting they'll be. So if you tell them, I want to start my own firm in a completely different practice area that doesn't compete with this firm, which is what pretty much every associate would do, because how are you going to compete with the firm?
Mm-hmm.
Usually they don't care. And so and even more so if you were going to say, oh, I just don't want to do this work, I want to be the district attorney or whatever, how can they get mad at that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's something I wish I had done, was talk about this with people more. At the same time, they may not have good advice because they don't really know anything outside of big law. So
Mm-hmm.
many of them will give better feedback if you're considering another big law job. At the same time, that's a much higher risk maneuver. So as far as what I did to prepare, a lot of it is just visualizing, maybe more so than taking practical steps, like making a business plan. So I would take a much more abstract approach and just go for maybe some long walks or something, and think like really big picture and just work on the vision. And the good news is, once you launch your own thing, it's going to be slow at first, obviously. So that's kind of a good thing, because then your first few months, you'll just allocate more of your time to the admin and the actual practicalities of setting it up. At the same time, those who do that in advance and do a hard launch on day one, they can be really dangerous too, because they're firing right from the beginning.
I love what you said about going for long walks. As like starting business tip number one, go for long walks. Don't spend too much time writing a business plan. But I will say I actually agree with that, because I think the more time you spend thinking about what you want to do, the more precise you can be in kind of outlining those plans, and having something you feel happy with, rather than, you know, developing this like master plan that you feel kind of tied to now, because you've developed this huge master plan and now you're like, oh, 3 months in, you're like, this is not working. And now you're like, oh wait, I have to change it. And so like you might get paralysis from that. And so I guess I want to ask Adam, and this is like totally not part of the script. But my question to you is, did you have a business plan when you started, or did you do the long walks, or was it like a combination of both? Like, how did you?
Mostly just the long walks, and you do that enough. Like the business plan, it just isn't written. So I don't know that I had less details in my head than if I had written it down. And sometimes writing is just a thinking exercise anyway. But in all the instances where I did write down business plans, which I've done many times in the 3 years that I've owned the firm, they never amount to anything. Like I always find like these old documents from like a year ago, and I'm like, why did I spend like half my Sunday putting that together? I didn't end up following through with any of that. So, and because you learn things as you go, really the only official business plan I put together was just like just a checklist of what was needed to establish the firm, which you can just download from the New York City Bar website. And yeah, and so no, I didn't do a business plan, but I did a business plan. I just didn't write it in a sense. So I think that's more of a personal thing. Like some people think better by writing things out, and they like to have a really long thing. But the problem is you're going to have to update it. So you have to be quite diligent to make use of your written business plan. You have to constantly revisit and rewrite things. And for me, every time I would do it and revisit something 6 months later, I was like, it would actually just make more sense for me to rewrite this from scratch at this point. So I think, yeah, I never wrote a business plan that I would refer back to as a document, but I did write the business plan as a thinking exercise, similar to going for a long walk.
No, that makes sense. And so like Kyle, you spend a lot of time actually working with smaller law firms and, helping them, like what you kind of, talked about in your intro. So like how would you help somebody like an Adam, in the early stages of his business, even like helping him with like business development and that sort of thing.
So Kyle did help me at the beginning. So I'll just answer a little bit for him. The main area where I think people need help is the mission and the vision, those kind of like big picture things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was working with Kyle on for a period in the first or second year. And that is something worth writing down, because you do need to be accountable to that as you do everything else. And if you want to change that, you should go ahead and actually write the changes. The part that I'm less interested in is like writing out, I'm going to use these tech vendors.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have these types of clients, because that's a little bit more pointless. But I'll let Kyle say more about how he does that.
Thank you for that, Adam. So yeah, I love in the beginning the long walks, thinking through, like we talked about last episode, your why, and really what matters to you, and because that's your own unique flavor. That's what your brand, your firm is going to be about, and so you have to get that right. Those directional statements, so that you can begin to speak them, live them, and attract other people who are like-minded to that mission, that vision, the values that you have, the purpose statements that you develop, so that you can kind of use it as a filter to understand whether you should do something or not, or how you're going to market, or how you're going to hire, or there's so many downstream effects. So I love that. Now we do, one of our core offers is a business plan. So we analyze a business in 12 key areas, and we identify your 5 largest opportunities for growth. And I really like what Adam said. They're only good for so long, 12 to 18 months, and then you need to reassess and like go back and update things. And so it's something that you continually need to think about. And there are important there's certain things you need to write down, and there's other things that you can think about. You can get by, especially in the beginning when it's just you. It's okay to have it up here, but as you grow, you need to communicate what's up here. You need to put it on paper. You need to speak it to your team. You need to think of how to integrate that into your marketing messaging and all that sort of a thing. So in the beginning, long walks are fine. As things grow, it needs to be documented more on paper.
No, that makes sense. Because I think, especially when you're talking about like scaling, right, and growing your business, you want to have a record of the things that have actually worked and the things that maybe didn't work and why. And at least that's something I found in my own business is recognizing, wait, this didn't work because I was targeting this specific, like market, but this could work in a different market 6 months from now or 2 years from now or whatever. And I think just having your notes, at least like that's something that has worked for me is going back and being able to say, oh, that didn't work because X.
Right. Yeah. And some of it you're going to only learn by doing. And so you got to get the reps in and, work with a variety of clients. And you're like, oh, I really liked working with this one client, and they were really easy to work with. And like I felt it energized me to do that type of work. And so I want to try to do more of that, but you're not going to know that until you actually do it. And so some of it is you kind of refine as you go. And that's what I was talking about earlier about, having a business plan is great. But I'm reminded of Mike Tyson. He said, everybody has a plan till you get hit in the face. So, you got to also hold it loosely and be able to make adjustments as things go. And what you might have planned on in the beginning may not make sense later on.
No, that makes sense.
So I wanted to ask you, Aubria, you took a sabbatical from your practice. Can you talk about like what prompted you to launch your company and kind of how you want your process?
So 2023 was like a psychotic year for me. I started out the year recovering from like stomach surgery. I like got COVID twice.
Mm.
Don't worry, I'm getting to the good news soon. I worked, I think, in a matter of like 6 weeks. I had like booked something like 600 hours. It
Mm.
was just like a crazy, like, Q1 of 2023 was just something else. And then I got honored with this Rising Star Award from my law school, which was like a huge deal. But I was dog tired, like, because I like I had like kind of like all the after effects of COVID, still recovering from surgery, and like still managing to do well at my job, which looking back, I'm like, I don't even know. Like when people ask me about that time, they're like, how did you do all of that? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I was running on adrenaline and like and probably like hair crack, which is, what we call hair relaxer. um for from like I literally was getting my hair done like regular, so like I always looked really good. But like I like physically was kind of functioning at like 50% capacity that whole time. But still like thriving on the outside. And then my cousin passed away suddenly.
Mm.
Like on his birthday, while I was on like a week off vacation. And so like that was when like the seed started getting planted in my head, like I need to reassess what I'm doing with my life, because if I keep this up, like I could be like one of these suddenlies. And we've lost like a few people in my family like before 40 as well, and he was one of them. And so it was one of those things where I was like, okay, girl, you can't. You just like you have to start figuring it out. And I'll admit, like I actually came up with a plan April of that year to keep working until March of this year, right? And then I was going to start Scrappy Go Project. So I had like my whole master plan, and and why did I know I was going to do this rather than start a law firm or go to another law firm? Well, people are always calling me for advice. There are people who are running businesses right now that we just had like a random conversation in the lockdowns, and now they have
Mm.
like a thriving business. um you know and so for me, like I had good data that I was good at giving people like sound advice for business that wasn't necessarily legal advice, just like strategy and that sort
Mm.
of thing. But ultimately, what I wanted to focus in on was like leadership, but kind of like coming up with this like holistic leadership ideology, where because I found like even when I don't know if you had this when you were at law firms too, Adam, but like I had like some leadership training while I was at the law firms, and it always felt like not like not enough, like incomplete, if you will. And so like for me, like I wanted to create something that really looked at like the person and really filling in gaps for like a specific person. So Scrappy Girl Project was born later on that year because I decided, you know what, I can't wait. Like yeah, it would be nice to keep pushing myself through this process. But there were a lot of changes, and I kind of alluded to it before at the firm that I was working at the time, where partners were like leaving like hotcakes.
Mm.
There was just like so much changes happening where like it got to the point where I was like, okay, y'all don't like each other anymore. And so me kind of deciding, okay, I can't stay here because a lot of the people that I used to work with had left, and in some cases really suddenly. And so I was like, okay, you need to start thinking about your exit plan. And so the good thing about planning ahead was I already had like a solid nest egg in place. And then being on lockdowns for the first 2 years also helped. Like I had money put away. So it was one of those things where I could just wake up and start a company. And that's essentially what happened. you know and so my process was less about, and that's why I guess I talked about giving yourself grace, because like I had these lofty plans of becoming a partner at a firm, was doing the like political game, the social game, I only talked about one award that I got that year, but like I think I got some like 5 awards because I was getting like pro bono awards, social justice, like I was just out here. And so some people, even now, like when I talk to attorneys, they're like, dude, like you were doing well, like why did you leave? And for me, it's all about like, are you doing well by your standards or by society standards, right? And so for me, it was like, I don't want to wake up tired. I don't want to, I don't want to dread like people calling me. I don't want to see somebody's name in my inbox that makes me like just want to, like, I don't know, fight somebody, because sometimes people just have that effect on you, right? And although I'm a really good actress, I am, because like when you're from a West Indian family, you learn how to, get pimp slapped just before dinner and smile at the table. You know how to do that. And you probably deserved it. Like you probably came out of your face to an adult. But you know how to like put your best face forward, if you will. And I feel like a lot of like immigrant cultures are taught that way, where it's like, put your best face forward, like everything's, and kind of like dim that part of you that's like, no, this is actually not okay behavior. And so although I always tell people like I'm really adaptable, but there's only so much I'm willing to adapt to. And so part of the reason Scrappy Girl Project was important for me to start was helping people build in specific, techniques in their everyday life so they didn't end up in this place that I had been, right? And had experienced myself. And so I remember at Big Law, like when I was actually working at the firm, I was good about taking my time off. You could email me on a Sunday, but you knew you were getting a response at 9 a.m. on Monday. Like I was not playing, and I wasn't a senior associate. I was very junior doing this to like senior partners. Like, oh, sorry, it's midnight. Bye. But having those boundaries made it really easy for me to kind of say, okay, Big Law is like, although I work at a big law firm, this is just part of my identity, if that. It's not my whole identity. So it was really easy for me to kind of strip that from myself. And so, not to pick on you, Adam, but see how like Adam introduced himself and he kind of plugged the big law firms that he worked at, which is like normal. It's completely normal behavior. Something I did on LinkedIn was I removed all of the identifying names of organizations I worked at, with the exception of CUNY. And so like people know that I've done big law, but they don't know what big law firms I've worked at. So I don't get people coming to me based on that part of my identity. And I did that on purpose because of the kind of business I was going into, because of the reputation that people in the big law space tend to have. I didn't want people to identify me as ex big law because I know what that sometimes comes with. And I wanted it to be like, no, like you're dealing with Aubria. And so that was very strategic for my business. But if I had a law firm, trust and believe, you would know what big law firms I worked at.
It's true. to use that background is just less relevant in certain circumstances, especially for someone like you who has other experience and is and selling something that isn't purely legal services. For me, frankly, I have a lot of competitors here in New York who are not qualified. Some of them have been around a long time. So they're incumbents. So they have a lot of experience, but it's bad experience. They're just doing things incorrectly for a really long time. And then there's other people who have no experience, but they're just really good at Instagram. And we've taken clients from these kind of low-level firms that have some sort of marketing edge from either from their incumbency or their Instagram. And we've helped a lot of people. But in order to make that case, I need to have the big law. And I hate to plug them, but it's really a self-promotion thing for me more than anything, especially because I don't have much else. I was K through JD and then straight to big law. And so that is my entire professional identity. And in many spaces, that's not super impressive. So if you're a business consultant, you might be valued for your creativity, and big law doesn't indicate creativity. But in legal services, whether it's in-house or solo, it goes a long way. And there's a reason people want to work with big law alumni. And there's a reason they have that edge when getting into in-house. But certainly in the small firm world, it's just too easy for people to enter. And it's too easy for people to fake it till they make it, and it's too easy for people to rest on their logs from their 30-year career. So I need to make it clear to the public, like, I paid my dues, and I'm not the same as this real estate lawyer who's been on Main Street for 20 years.
No, I think that's valid, Adam. And that's why I made the distinction, because I think a lot of times people have judgments, right, about people putting X anything on their profile, right? But again, it's like, we live in a world that's shallow. Like let's not pretend, right? Like, if you can, think about it, big law firms, they hire the top school people, like, and if they go beyond like the top 25 schools, they're looking at like the top 15%, maybe 20% max of, so it's like always looking at the highest ranked people. And so the idea that, you should hide that, I don't think is necessary, especially when it's relevant for your business. But I will say, being ex big law was helpful for me getting some of my like Fortune 500 companies to like have me come in and do stuff, right? Would I have been as impressive had I not had that? No. Like, like, no matter what I think about myself, it's not me saying I'm not worthy without it. It's just, that's how society looks. Like, society's going to judge you on superficial metrics. No matter how fair we think we are. Like, we're all very shallow people.
Well, true, but it's not all superficial. And, one example I have right here is, surely you know this book, the Green Book, as we call it. And you see here these names at the bottom. Yeah. I didn't just read the book. These are my teachers. So, a lot of people, they talk, they say what they say, and I say, where did you get that information? Like, who is your teacher? And what's your tradition?
What's your provenance?
Yeah. And so I keep these books here, and it's like, I see Bellucci, McCluskey. These are the best finance lawyers in the world. And I got my techniques. I didn't just make up my techniques. I got it straight from them. Now, obviously, I've added my own twist, but I'm proud to say, like, I got it from a good source. And it's not to say that that's the only good source. There are some people who are truly self-taught, but law is not coding, and I think there are certain areas where being self-taught is awesome, and maybe even preferable, because you have more of an open mind. But law is very precedent based, and you have to know the way things are done. And sometimes I deal with lawyers for small banks or local lawyers in small towns who are opposed to me. And I'm like, they don't know how things are done. They don't know the procedures. And maybe those procedures are arbitrary. But I know that if I'm negotiating against a big law firm, I know how to act the right way, so to speak, within reason. But there is a superficial element to it as well, because as lawyers, it's very hard for us to provide objective evidence of what we can bring to the table. If I was a salesman, I would never say where I worked. I would just give the stats. And if I was a software engineer, I would show my projects. I would never say X over. I would say this is what I can do. But we don't have those objective metrics. So it's kind of an imperfect solution. Like, I acknowledge the limitations and the superficiality of it, but I don't really know what else I can do.
Well, I think it goes back to what you said, right? It's like some people can fake it until they make it, but you're not going to be wasting your client's time. And so maybe you don't attract people initially outside of, oh, this person used to be in big law, so they know what they're doing. But once you get them, you display that you've done, like, you did the work, you did the, you've established that you've done good work for them. They've gotten good results. And so, it's more of like an attraction component, and not, oh, I was in, and I don't know why I'm making this distinction, but maybe somebody's going to listen to it and be like, oh, just because you're in big law doesn't mean you know stuff. But it's like, no, like, when you go to a big law firm, like, you are trained, whether you're trained formally or informally, because you think about it, you learn on the job. And so just having the exposure to the work, like, you're going to learn. And so I think using whatever model, and I'm sure Kyle would agree, to attract, it's like you want to attract the clients you want to attract, right? And if somebody is reaching out to you because you're ex big law, they're going to understand, well, maybe my fees are not the same as, getting into the fee component, my fees are probably not the same as, lawyer Joe down the block, but lawyer Joe is going to take twice as long for me to get what I need, because he's swamped doing, 35 different areas of law,
Right.
because he's a mercenary, right? And I have this person who is strictly corporate
Right. They're
business, specialized, who had the specialized training to do the work for me. And I think, like, there is value in that as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you also have to push back, for me at least, against, my youthfulness. Sometimes people do say to me, like, oh, Adam, you only have, like, 5 or 6 years of experience. I talked to your partner, she said she only has 5. And I'm just like, but the deal count and the volume, it's basically like 20 years. And so if I get those objections to my face. And, just recently, like, my partner marked up or drafted a document, and we get a bunch of stupid comments back because the client ran it by his friend who's a 20+ year corporate lawyer, instead of just trusting us. So it's a little bit of a chip on the shoulder kind of thing as well. Like, if you want to, it's like a defense. Like, you want to play the years of experience credential game, then I'm going to play the cards that I have in
exactly. No, that sounds right.
Yeah, and I think both of you guys brought up interesting points about, like, how you emphasize it, Adam, and how you don't, Aubria, and why it makes sense for your particular use case. And I think it's important to understand, like, why you guys landed where you did, and then no matter where anybody lands, it's important to understand you have to be comfortable to self-promote, and play the cards that you've been dealt, and be able to leverage the authority of other people's brands till you have an established brand of your own. So I like what you guys had to say. I wanted to ask you guys, what advice would you have for somebody who maybe they've been in big law a while and they're like, this isn't for me, or I thought it was for me and things have shifted, and how would what advice would you give them to transition to something else?
So I know when I was at like the two law firms that I was at, they actually had somebody to help with that, like a
Oh, really?
professional person who could you could get placed, right? So like if you're no longer interested in doing the work. So something Adam alluded to earlier about like why it's important to talk about your plans with mentors sometimes is if you're thinking, oh, I want to go in-house, because like I want to go work for an asset manager, and you've been doing like private equity work, for example, it would make more sense for you to use leverage your big law firms career, almost like career services type office. And I think they all have something like that, where you can go sit with a client. And for most big law firms, they're willing to do that for you because ultimately you're going to be their client. Like at some point, like if you go and work for their client, you could potentially bring them work, right? So it's not, it's not charity that they're giving to you. It's actually a very strategic move.
Yeah.
So there's that, right? Also a lot of like law firm partners on boards of like nonprofits and so like using, going back to leveraging the network that you have, I think you want to start there if you want to continue in the legal space or in, kind of like working for, like having an employer, if you will, right? But I think if you're thinking, oh, I want to start something new, like we kind of covered that a little bit already, where it's
Sure.
like start planning ahead. Like it's nice sometimes to do stuff, on the fly and like have it work out, but most things don't work on the fly. So
Yeah.
I think having like a proper plan in place, um, my the one thing I'm gonna drive home here is you need to have money saved.
Yes.
Like you're
Yes.
gonna need capital. You have to go into it thinking it's my money that's gonna keep me going. Like don't go into it thinking somebody's gonna give you money. Because ultimately, even when you're looking for investors always want to see like how much of your own money have you put into your startup. Like they're not like no one's just gonna give you money
Well, also,
unless you're like ex open AI and promising things because
well, you don't always want investors either,
yeah.
because then they have a seat at the table and they have influence over you. And so if you can um, build your own business, develop your own clients, have your own cash flow coming in,
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot more control over your destiny.
Yeah.
And you know, what your mission and vision is, it could be really important to you, but it might not be important to the investor at all. They might just say, I want a return, and you need to do X, Y, and Z thing
Mm-hmm.
to get a better return. And it's not about your mission or vision. It's about me getting a better return on my money.
I think that's good advice, and then I'll let like Adam kind of like close us out with his opinions because I think his opinions are going to be like
Yes.
really valuable here. Since he does work with a lot of like startups, right?
Yeah.
And like smaller business owners, but ultimately, like even on that investment point, I remember I was watching like a Shark Tank episode, and the person kind of pitching was kind of like, well, I'd rather be 50% owner of $10 million than be 100% owner of no money, because that's kind of like where they were, right?
Yes.
And so like I think there has to be this balance between your ideal vision of things and like ultimately what's the point of going into business, because let's be honest, nobody's going into business to not make money.
Sure. It's
You
always a
know,
component. Yep.
but then on the flip side of that, I think having your own cash flow to kind of get you started is really, really important. And maybe that's where your planning comes in, like actually doing financial planning. I think like maybe you don't need a business plan, but you need to have a financial plan in place for where you're trying to go, because not having you don't always get the cash flow you want right away, right? Sometimes it can be
Absolutely.
slow, and as you're doing this administrative work that you might have to do early on, you need to be able to keep the business going, because bills come. Like we all own our own businesses, and so like you're gonna have to pay bills even if you're not getting money,
Yep.
you know.
100%.
And so trying to figure out how you get that funding, I think, is really important. And then I'm just gonna hand it off to Adam because I know he has stuff to say.
So I definitely agree with you both about the dangers of giving people a seat at the
Mm-hmm.
table. And I definitely agree that you have to have money because you need a long runway.
Mm-hmm.
And it always takes more time than you think to get started. So when you put together that financial plan, do it with a big margin of error. Give whatever, if you think you need 11 months, make it 18 months. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first thing. And then the second is I would split the startups into two categories: the true high growth tech startups that will inevitably take outside capital. It's just a matter of
Mm-hmm.
when. And then you have the more consulting businesses like yours. And I work with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people in both categories, many who are ex bankers. So basically, pretty much the same boat as us.
Mm-hmm.
They just go on their own and they're consulting or they're doing whatever they're doing. So for some businesses like that, there really isn't much opportunity to take investor money. Certainly not institutional
Mm-hmm.
investor money. So for those people, you really need the runway. And like if an investor were to come into you with a business like that, like a small business or a consulting business, probably you won't be happy with the terms because
Mm-hmm.
they really need a clear path to how they're going to get their returns, like Kyle said. Whereas on the other hand, with the tech startups, you're selling a pipe dream anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a more standard way of doing things. So I think in reality, for the tech startup people, it's going to be a while before they get the institutional money anyway. Like you said, like no one's going to just get funded just off a good idea unless they have a really big credential. So what most people do is they put their own money in, and then they do like maybe some sort of like friends and family round if they don't have
Mm-hmm.
enough of their own money. But either way, there has to be that long runway before people start to entertain you seriously. So yeah, I think that's basically it. Like you
Mm-hmm.
gotta have cash in the bank because money is time.
Yeah.
And statistically, we know like many businesses have to survive a certain amount of time in order to have a high probability of success. And we know that businesses that do survive a certain amount of time, the probability of them making it goes way up. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're gonna fail before that, 3-year mark or whatever it is, let it be a failure due to the business being bad. Don't fail because of liquidity problems, because
Mm-hmm.
fail because you ran out of money, you could be shutting down a business that was destined for success. And that's just a shame. So, but anyone who's in big law, most likely you do have some money. And if you don't have it saved up for whatever reason, there's a solution to that, which is stay longer. And
Mm-hmm.
and so the advice I give to people who want to get out is a bit counter. Like often I say, stay longer if you
Yeah.
can. Stay as long as you can, because no matter what you want to do, whether it's going in-house, nonprofit, or starting your own company, there's always more to gain by staying longer. And
Mm-hmm.
so the in-house path, it's better. It's just better exits. And you
Mm-hmm.
want to exit. Where you exit is very important, because you might not get promoted at in-house.
Yeah.
You might not get a raise. A lot of people who work in-house never get raises. So where you come in is that much more important, which is different
Mm-hmm.
than big law, because it's all about how far you can go. And
Right.
many other companies are like that too. Like, if you're at a business where you're the important person, so you're the lawyer at the law firm, you're the salesman at the tech company, you're the whatever you are, you can rise up, and your comp and your status is all determined by how well you do. If you're going to be an in-house counsel and you're just sitting in the back office, there's not going to be opportunities for you to prove yourself and show why you deserve to get raises every year. It's just not going to happen. So you want to come in at the highest level that you can. And I think that's part of why in-house didn't work out for me, because I left as soon as it was possible to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really have the cream of the crop. I was like, I'm leaving as soon as I get to a point where I can. And
Mm-hmm.
and so, I didn't have the best job. It was good in some ways, but it wasn't like as good as it could have been. So no
Mm-hmm.
matter what you want to do, staying longer can be a solution to your problems, whether it's needing more money or needing more experience to get a better exit role.
And I want to add that it's important, Adam, to understand that even though you might be in a job you don't really like, you have that more planning time.
Yeah.
And if you can plan and build your base, the wider your base is, the higher and more scalable it's going to be, your business. So there you can see the opportunity in staying a little bit longer and go like, hey, this is giving me room to plan and room to adjust and make my business actually a success, and see it for just that more planning time and more cash flow or more savings for your business to work.
No, I think that's right. Thank you both for taking time out of your Fridays, the last few weeks to just be here and have these conversations with me. It's nice to like hear your own voice sometimes, but it's better when you can hear other people's voices, in my opinion. And so, just having the ability to even have these conversations in this public forum, I think is really important, because these are conversations that I don't think are happening enough. And so people often feel stuck where they shouldn't feel stuck. And so, if you are a big law attorney and you're thinking, oh, I kind of have to like stay here forever. Kind of know like there are options that are available to you. Like if nobody told you, like there are options, please, do your research, talk to people. One thing I know about lawyers is we love talking to people about stuff. So you will be able to get advice, but also, recognize that like any advice you get, ultimately you have to live with the decisions that you make for yourself. So make sure you're considering like what your threshold of pain is. I think is really important. Like for me, like I knew when I left my big law job, like I was gonna be okay not getting my hair done every month, and kind of insert all the extra accoutrements you tend to like pick up. And so know your threshold of pain, be willing to like plan ahead, but also understanding like it's okay to be flexible in your plan, because life requires that we be flexible, even when we have the best laid plans, right? But thank you both so much for showing up and showing out for me. I really appreciate you. And I do not take this lightly. And I look forward to future collaborations. Any last words from both of you?
I feel the same way.
Thanks, Aubria. This was great.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the conversation. This has been good, and like you said, I don't feel like enough people are talking about it, especially in the legal space. These types of conversations don't usually happen, or happen a lot less, or they're discouraged. So no, this has been good.
All right. Well, all right, guys. Thank you so much. Bye.